What's up guys, in this video I'm going to be showing you how I made this portal. It's kind of like a weather effect now. I've made it kind of like take up the entire screen, but basically what's going to happen is when the game starts you'll watch a cutscene where the evil red stick wizard has found the crystal of realism, right? And he opens a portal from the 2D world into the 3D, because they're going to start in 2D because they're stickmen. He's going to open a portal from the 2D world into the 3D world, and when he does, when you follow him through the portal, you'll end up falling through this gigantic weather effect into the scene. Now I've disabled the scene for right now just while I was making the effect, because the effect's rather large and the scene was in the way. I'm not sure yet if he's going to fall into like a forest or the cave. You might have already seen the cave, it's in my other videos, but I'm thinking about making it like a forest, and then he'll progress from the forest, and after you kill the boss you go into the cave, and then from the cave there's like an abandoned castle entrance, etc. So I kind of have the story going now. I haven't really made like a trailer or anything yet, but it's a work in progress. But anyway, this effect turned out really good. You can download this on my Patreon. So if you just want to get the entire effect, if you download it on my Patreon, you just have to double click the package file and you can get this effect into your game right away. All of the pictures required to actually make this are available in the description of the video for free, so you can download them. And there's a lot of cool effects that went into this, or a lot of cool techniques that I used to make this. So this is the visual effect graph, right? And inside of it, I'm using age over lifetime into a shader. And then inside of the shader, I'm going between two gradients over the lifetime. Now, this is like a really awesome effect. So like it starts out as this really bright color, and then over the lifetime of the particle, it turns into this dark green color, so the particles aren't all the same color. If you don't use a shader graph, you can't get the different, like this, see how like the edges of this picture are dark and then like the inner is green, like a lighter green. In order to do that, you have to use the shader graph. If you just use like the color inside of the visual effect graph, the only thing available is color over life, or just set color, and that sets the color of the entire particle at once, which is no good. You want your particle to have like different areas of it that have different colors. And then I'm also randoming between two pictures. So usually what you can do is have something called like a flip book, and I already made this video and I had to redo it because I was talking too much, but you could have a flip book, and like what will happen is over the lifetime of the particle, this will play, then this will play, then this will play, then this will play, etc. right? But I didn't do that because I drew these separately and I didn't want to put them into the same picture. So I'm just randoming between these two particles. So like every particle that gets spawned will either be this one or this one. So you can't really see them here, but this is this one and this is this one. I'll probably show you how I drew these as well. I have a little bit more time today, so yeah, this turned out really good. And yeah, like I said, you can download this stuff in the description of the video. I think this effect is really cool. All right, so I'm just going to right click at the bottom. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'll call this portal tutorial. And inside of the portal tutorial folder, if you right click, you can click create visual effect graph. If you don't see this option, if you go to the window option at the top, you can click package manager, and then on the right here you can type in visual, and visual effect graph should be something that pops up. If you don't see it, this says packages unity registry. For me, make sure you're choosing this and not in project. This is inside of a universal render pipeline project, so if you don't have a project when you create it, make sure you choose the universal render pipeline. But yeah, so when you click visual effect graph here, there should be an install option on the right if you don't have it installed, so click that and it will install it. Let's just name this portal, or you can call it whatever you want to, it doesn't really matter. So after you've made this, let me just delete the one I already have. After you've made this, you can drag it into your scene. If you double click on it, you should see it. I'm just gonna hide my stickman for right now so we can only see this portal effect. So this is what the default visual effect graph looks like. It doesn't have, it's just like, this is the default particle and there's a certain number of them spawning and they're going upwards towards the sky, okay? When you double click on it, you get this screen, which is, this is the visual effect graph essentially, right? So I'm just gonna put this right beside this so that we can see it better. So everything in this is pretty self-explanatory. So this is spawning 16 particles per second, and the capacity is 32. So we wanna make that, so what the, we wanna make that more. So let's make this 1500, and we're gonna set the capacity to 3000. Right, so if you see this lagging on your game when you do this, at the top here, there's like this drop down, and see where it says always refresh? If you turn this on, this will prevent this from lagging. If you don't have always refresh on, and you like move around, it could start lagging. So this is a lot of particles. So what we want to do is we want to put them into a circle. Okay, so if you click where it says set velocity random, you can press the space bar and you could type in set position. And when you do this, there's a lot of shapes that you can put the particles in. So if you look at this, there's like a torus, there's a sphere, there's lots of different shapes that you're able to put them in. I'm just going to put it into an arc circle, and then we want to rotate this 90 degrees. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You could set the rotation of the circle right here. So if you click these little arrows inside of the arc circle, make sure you don't click this, it'll put it into world position. But there's like little drop down arrows, and then one of them is the angle. You'll change the angle X to 90, and I don't know if that, it did work. It's just they're all going upward still. So then we're gonna change the radius of this to be much, much larger. So let's try 30 and see how that turns out. Okay, so that is really, really big. Now we don't actually want this to be that big. So let's set the radius back to 1. And we're gonna change the velocity. So let's change the, just right below this, the velocity, change the first number to 0. Now we wanna get the position of where these are. So type in, if you press the spacebar to the left, like click somewhere and press spacebar, you can type in get position. We wanna get the position and put this to the B component of this. And when you do this, you can see that it will start at the radius of the circle and it will go outwards. So let me get out my paint so I can explain this. So when we set the position, we're setting the particles around a circle, right? And the position is the distance from the center, like the midpoint to that, right? So for example, this one would be like 1y or something, right? Well, we're gonna use the position. So if this is 1y, so that would be 0, 1, 0, which is just upwards, right? If it's 1y, where we can, that's basically setting the velocity to 1y. So we're setting the velocity to the position, so it will go towards the position that it spawned. So you can use this to actually make it go away from the center. We're gonna set the radius of this to much smaller because we want it to spawn in the very center. All the particles, it doesn't look like there's a gap in the middle, and then they're going outwards away from the middle, okay? So we wanna set the radius to really, really small, but we want this to be much faster. So we want these to go away from the center significantly faster than they are. So to do this, what we can do is delete that bond that we have between position and the B, and we can move this into a multiply node. And we'll put this into B. And then if you want, you could put this into the blackboard for this. So let me just shrink this a little bit so it fits better. So there's like this little X icon. If you click that, this is called the blackboard. This is where you could put variables that will go into your graph. So if you click this plus thing on the top here, you can add a float variable to this. And we will call this speed. And we're just going to be setting this to a float. You could also do this as a vector 3 because there's 3 values. So if you wanted this to go up more or away more or whatever, you could multiply each of them individually by using a vector 3 instead of a float. Float is just a single value. It will multiply all of them by the same amount. So we want to change the speed to something significantly higher, maybe 30. Right, so this is the start of this. Now, this number is not high enough. Like, I'll probably want it much higher. So if I turn on my stickman, you can see like my stickman is gigantic compared to this, right? He's standing on it like a Titan or something, like just a god stickman. So we're gonna want this to be much, much larger. So let's just get out of that for right now. So we're just gonna, maybe we'll change this to like 1500. Right, and the size of this needs to be larger. So like if you see how big the stickman is, we want these particles to be much, much larger. So we're gonna take this portal in the scene view and we're just gonna move it up on the y-axis so that it's above his head. And it should actually be like way above his head. Now, actually let's make it way, way higher. Because he's just like a little dot in the other one that I have. So something that we need to do is if you click on the portal at the bottom that you've just made, there's this thing that says culling flags on the right here. And we want to put this to always recompute bounds and simulate. If you don't turn this on when you're not looking at this, it will not actually draw it. So like if you're looking down here at your stickman and only part of it's on the screen, it actually won't draw it. And sometimes it will glitch and not actually show this. So you want to always simulate this. The other thing you need to do is at the top where you have bounds, we need to actually go into the bounds, set the center to be 000, but then the size of it, set it to like 10,000 by 10,000 by 10,000. If you're outside of the bounds, like if the camera is outside of the bounds of this, it won't draw it, even if you have always recompute bounds and simulate. So just make this like really, really high, because this effect is going to be massively large. And if it's not really, really big, then it won't encapsulate it. And if you look the wrong direction, it won't draw it. And like, just trust me, you have to set the size of this to massive. So then we want to set the size of the particles. Now, before we do that, we're just going to go to the bottom here and we're going to turn off these. Actually, we can delete these. Set size over life and set color over life. You can go ahead and delete them. And then up here, we're just going to set the size. Now, I've made these really, really big in mine. You can make this a random if you want. So go to random per component. If you click on this and there's like not a random here on the right side, you can, where it says random, you can turn it on just by changing this here. So, or when you go to add this block, you could type in set size and add the word random, and you could just select the option. There is not a per component option though, so you're going to want to make sure you just change it to per component. Anyway, so we're going to make this between 1 and like 50. And we actually want to make it between 40 and 50 because we don't actually want any of the particles to be really small. So we're still using the default particle, which obviously looks really bad. So we want to change this to one of the pictures from my thing. So let me just go here for now. And I'm just going to copy all of the pictures into my new folder. I'll upload all of these so you can play around with the different ones and get a combination that you like. We're just going to use maybe particle T3 in here for now. So you can just drag it and paste it here. You can see that this doesn't look great, okay? The middle just looks like it's all one solid blob, and that's why you have to use a shader graph to make this look better. We're still not done the effect yet though. So in my other effect, it's spinning in a circle, and we don't have that going on yet. So what we want to do, we're also not setting the angle to a random angle as well. So each of these particles that's coming out, they're all on the same exact angle. So they all look exactly the same. So up here, if you just press the space bar and type in set angle random. Set angle random. I don't know why that didn't pop up. Set angle random per component. And then just change this drop down to Z. We only want to change the Z axis because it's a picture, it's not 3-dimensional. So you're only rotating it from that. And we're just going to do between negative 360 and 360. So you can see all the particles are now coming out in a random orientation, which actually adds a lot to the effect. It makes it look a lot better. So we want to rotate this entire particle system in a circle. Okay, so if we get the position the same way we did before, and we put that into a rotate 3D node. And then in the update particle, we're going to press the space bar and we're going to type in set position. And then this is going to go into this. Okay, so the rotation axis that we're going to use, we're going to do 0.1 on the Y. So it's kind of tilting it. And then we're going to use 1 on Z. So Z will make it rotate in a circle like this, but the Y will make it like go kind of on a tilted angle, which makes it look a lot more weathery. And then the angle is going to be something really, really low. You don't want to make this a high number because it will rotate it like drastically. And okay, so instead of setting the angle to 90 here, we're going to set it to 0. And then in the actual effect itself, like if you click on the portal on the right, we're just going to change this to 90. The reason that it wasn't rotating correctly was because if you set the position here, it's actually different than setting it. So this is in like the local space, and then this is in the world space, and changing it in the world space is different. Like if you change it in the local space, it affects the angle for this rotation. So anyway, so you can see that this is spinning in a circle now. This is not nearly as big as the effect that I have going in the other one. I think I set this number to something much larger, and it was a random between two numbers. So we're gonna actually, the start speed needs to be more because they're all clumping in the middle. So we're gonna set this to 40. Actually, we need to rename this altogether. So let's rename this to min speed. And then we will duplicate this with Control D. And then we'll call this max speed. And we're just gonna set this to 4,500 or something like really high. And so the min speed can go into the A value, and then the max speed can go into this. And we're gonna do another multiply here. And then we'll drag this max speed down here, put it into the B, and then that can go into the B value. And now you can see that because the mins, we don't want it to be 0 because there's too many of them that are clumping in the middle, and we want them to be spread out more. So this just makes it way, way bigger and cooler. So we're getting closer to what we have. The size probably needs to be bigger still. So maybe we'll make this like to 150. And this one can be like 100. We don't want any of them to be too small. Right, so this is getting closer to the effect that we had in the intro. So you can see that there's no color in this, and this is where we need to actually make a shader graph. So let's save the portal, and we'll dock it at the top here. And if we right-click at the bottom, we can create a shader graph, URP lit shader graph, and we're going to call this portal shader. And if we double-click on the portal shader, oops. You'll get a shader graph, which is very similar to the visual effect graph. Like these two things are like fun to, like they're very similar, so you don't have to worry about like redoing everything or like learning everything over again. Like all these nodes, like a lot of them are very similar, and you can use the same nodes for everything. So what we want to do now is let me just make this a little bit smaller. We're just going to drag in one of the particles. So we're going to use the just particle T. Like I said, I'm going to upload all of these, so you can just choose whichever one you want. Don't use T5. This one sucks. It's not good. To make the particle, I use Sketchbook. So if you can download this for free from the internet. Autodesk Sketchbook is really good. If you go to the image size, you could just change it to turn off key proportions and just change it to a square. So I did 500 by 500, but again, you can do whatever you want to. And then in the background, just change it to black temporarily while you're making this. And there's something really awesome for symmetry. So if you're missing any of these like little window things that are popped up on mine, if you go to your window, there's all these checkboxes and you could just turn them on by clicking them. Okay, so if you're missing anything that you see me using, you can just turn it on in this like window list or whatever, right? And you can actually do symmetry, and you can do symmetry even like to this. So if you take the paintbrush, or maybe you just take one of these brushes, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's like a little drawing of what it is in the top right. Let me just go to one that's more pronounced. It's because it's white. Hang on, let me just do black. So like if you look at the top right, you can see what the brush is. And a lot of these, it's really easy to make a particle with them because you're just drawing in like... And having this symmetry option just makes it so that like it's always perfect, right? Like it will always be exactly the same on all the sides. Now, this isn't what I did for this because this is a weather effect, so it needs to be more cloudy. Let me just get a reference of the one that I actually made. Hang on, what does particle T look like? Yeah, so what I did was I drew a circle and then I went around the edges and just like smoothed it out. So there's also a circle tool right here that you can use. So turn off symmetry, and then you can go to the paintbrush and just make a circle like this. That's obviously way too thick. You can change the size of your brush with the square bracket keys. So you can make a circle, make sure you make it in the center. And then you could use the fill tool to fill it. If you haven't created anything yet, this will just fill the first time. You don't usually have to do this. And then what I did was I took the soft brush, and I think I just turned on the symmetry and I went over it with the soft brush to make this effect. And we don't really want these hard edges. I don't know. I just played around with it until I got something that I liked. But yeah, this is what I used to make this. And just turning on the symmetry, you can make anything. Like, just play with the different brushes until you get something that you kind of like, you know? Anyway, let me just get out of this. So if you drag the particle T, again, this will be uploaded in the description of the video, drag it into this shader graph. And then what we want to do is create a gradient. So if you right click, you can create a node and just type in the word gradient. And the gradient has to go into a sample gradient. And you can drag the alpha from this into the time node, which will actually show you a picture of it. And then you can drag the alpha into the, oh shit, we got to go to the settings first. So if you go to the graph inspector, which is in the top right of the shader graph, this is where you set the settings for this. We want to make the render surface transparent because we want the edges to not be visible, and we want the alpha option. And then we would need to turn off cast and receive shadows, turn off preserve specular lighting. If you don't do this, you'll get a square box around your particle. And then at the very bottom, it says support visual effect graph. So turn that one on. And then we want to drag the alpha from the sample texture 2D directly into the alpha. So we're going to be changing the color of it, but we want the normal particle's alpha. So like the edges of the particle before we apply the color is where the alpha is like the visibility of it. Okay, so yeah, so then what we can do is we'll drag this a little bit to the right, and then we'll save this. And then inside of the portal visual effect graph, if you click the shader graph option, you should have an option for portal shader. Let me just, portal tutorial, yeah, it's this one. So now that we've done that, if we go back, you can see that it's a gray blob. So that's kind of what we were expecting. So if you go to the gradient, now is where you can change the color of the gradient. So what I did is I think I took this to like dark green, and then this edge could be the same. So dark green. Yeah, and then this middle part can be like a lighter green. And then this one could be a green with like a higher intensity. And then this actually needs to just be darker. Oh, and then you need to drag the sample gradient into the base color, so it actually changes the color. Okay, cool. So this effect is looking a lot better. This is really, really dark. So we just want to make this a lot brighter. So let's just turn this up. And then we will make this glowy. Just save it like that. So yeah, so this is how you can make the middle of them a different color, like a darker color, and then the edges can be like that. So we want the middle to be this one, but then we want the edges to be darker, and we do want to random between two of these. So let's do the random. All right, so actually the way that I did this in the intro of the video doesn't work. It wasn't actually randoming, but just because of like how faded it is together, I couldn't tell the difference. So to do this, what we'll do is turn on the blackboard, which is this button here. And any variables that you put into the blackboard here, you can actually edit them in the visual effect graph. So if you press plus here, you can make a float, and we're going to call this one random. So we'll drag random here into our shader graph. This is the shader graph, by the way. And random will go into a random, branch node, sorry. It'll go into a branch node as the predicate. So a branch node is like the predicate is the value, and then true is, this is what the number will be if it's true, and then this is, so if it's true, it will do this one, and if it's false, it will do this one. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna drag the alpha of this into the true block, and then if it's false, we need to drag a different particle in here. So let's do T4. Let me just double click on it. I don't remember what any of them look like. So that's T4. And let's do T4 as this one, and then T3 as this one. So we're making sure they look different. So we're going to drag the alpha of this bottom one, so the alpha, both of these, the alpha. So the alpha of the top one goes into true, and the alpha of the bottom one goes into false. And then this is an input that's going to come from the shader graph. And then the output of this is actually going to go into the sample gradient, and it's also going to go into the, into the alpha that's inside of this. So like there's alpha here, and then it's going into this. So it's going into two places. So when we save this, all of them are still the same particle. And they're the first particle, not the second one. So if we go back into the visual effect graph, yeah, you can see it here. Okay, so we have this random value now. So when this is 0, it'll be the first particle. And when it's 1, it will be the second particle, right? So what we want to do is we want to right click here and create a node. And we're just going to do random. Now this random option in the visual effect graph that we've made has a random number per particle, so you can make every single one randomized per particle. Now, if you use a time node or a random node inside of here, this will keep changing, like it will keep flickering as it goes on. So the way that I have it set up in the intro of the video, it's actually flickering between the two, which is not good. It makes it lag. It's not really noticeable in the preview, but it actually adds some lag to it. So we're gonna drag the R of this into the random. So it's going between 0 and 1. We want the seed, we want the maximum for this to be 99999. So the number is always random. So then if we save this and we go back to the scene view, okay, I figured it out. Okay, so instead of this, so in the visual effect graph, this will be a random number, which could be any number, right? So the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 99999, and there's also decimal points in between that. So that doesn't work because true and false is either 0 or 1, right? So if it's a random number, if it will always be, it's like 0 to 999, it will always be above 1. That's why you're only seeing the one particle, right? So what we need to do is in the shader graph, if we take the random, we can drag it to a random as the seed, right? And then because the seed will only be set once per particle, then this will actually be random between 0 and 1. And if you drag this into the predicate, you can save it. And then in this scene, it will be actually random. So this is, again, my other one wasn't actually randoming and I couldn't tell the difference. This looks really cool, but this isn't good enough because these aren't faded together at all. And it's too, like, you can see the particles. Like, you could add more particles maybe to make it look a little bit better, but you can visibly see the particles. So one thing you could do, and you could mess around with this, you could lower the number of particles and you could make this additive instead. This will make it really, really glowy and bright so that they like all add together. Like I said, put less particles because that's too many particles on top of each other and makes it really glowy. This will make it so the particles are less noticeable that they're individual, but that's not what I did in mind because I actually like seeing the details of the drawings that I did. So what we want to do is inside of this thing or whatever, right? We want to get the lifetime of the particle. So let's create another float and we'll call this lifetime. And we're going to drag this into the scene here. And we're going to create a lerp node, right? And the lerp is going to go into, the lifetime is going to go into the T value. So the lerp, what it does is, let me get out my trusty paint document again. Let me just start a new document. So let's say you have two colors. This is color 1. Pretend this is like dark green and this is light green, right? So this is the lerp node. So lerp is between 0 and 1, right? So halfway between this, so this is the lifetime of the particle. Halfway between this will be halfway between these colors, right? So it doesn't just determine, oh, it's above this number, so it's going to be dark green or light green, right? It fades between the two. So like at 0.25, for example, into the lerp, it will be 25% this color and 75% this color, right? So like it kind of fades between the two instead of just like going, that's what lerp does. Maybe that's not a great explanation. So we're going to put the output of this sample gradient, the first one that we made, as A. Now this is the center. So the center is going to be like a lighter green, and then the edges are going to be a darker green. So in order to make the darker green, we just need to duplicate this. So if you press Control-C, Control-V, you can duplicate it, right? And then we're going to put this into the B value. So this is going to be the start color of what it is, and this is going to be the end color of what it is. And then we want to make this way darker. So we want like the edges to be like dark, I guess. Maybe not black. I don't know. Let's just see. Let's save this and see what it looks like. Okay, so we didn't actually set it up in the portal yet. So this is always 0. So it's always going to be the first color. So what we want to do is go to the portal graph, and there's an input for lifetime now. And if you right click, you can create a node and type in lifetime. And we're going to do the age over lifetime. So this will constantly be changing over like, as the particle moves towards the end of its life, it will be going towards this. And we want to set the lifetime to be uniform 2 seconds. So get rid of the random. So on the right here, you can just turn the random off the same way that you added it. And then we want to save this and go back to the scene view. Okay, so I don't see, oh, I didn't output the lerp into the base color. So in our shader graph, we have to output the lerp into the base color. Okay, so you can see the middle of it is now like a lighter green, and then the output, like the edges are like a darker green. So we want to change this so that it's a lot brighter. So we want the middle to be like really, really bright. And that way it can kind of stand out a little bit. Okay, and the last kind of thing that I've done here is I actually set the particle to be the same. So I'm using T3 for both of them now. I didn't like the way the other one looked. It had too much of like a circle, like you could actually see it too much. And so these edges, they're like, obviously that's not a good edge of this. This needs to kind of fade away instead of just like disappearing abruptly. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna take this branch node and we're gonna dump this into a multiply node, and we're going to take the lifetime of the particle, which we're using for the color right now, and we're going to take it to a 1- node. So a 1- basically just takes 1 and subtracts this, because the lifetime as it goes up, if we put this to the multiply, it will get if we just put this to the multiply, it will get brighter over, but if we do 1-, it will get darker over, and then we can put this into the alpha. So what this will do is, this is like the alpha over lifetime. This will fade the edges so it doesn't look so like the edges are way too hard, because you can see the particles too much and you don't even want that. So, and we still like, this is fading and it looks really cool, but I think what we can do is we can make the size over lifetime. So in this output particle quad inside of the visual effect graph, if you press the space bar, you can set the size over the lifetime. And we want it to start out at 1 and go for most of it, but then get smaller at the end so that we don't see these like huge particles disappearing. We want them to be small when they disappear. And then also set size over life defaults to overwrite. We don't want to overwrite the value. We will actually want this to multiply the value. So then as they get towards the edges, they're smaller when they're disappearing. Like, so they don't look like they're these huge things that are disappearing. And let's actually just move this more over. All right, guys, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. It really means a lot to me. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. In my actual shader, I did end up using the particle T that I got rid of earlier. So that's like, it is randoming between these two. And I think it's actually just using this one. I set the gradient so that it has a 0 alpha ending to it. And these are the colors for this. So they're like dark green, light green, etc. Like I said, you got to mess with these yourself. So obviously these are different than the ones that I was showing you in the tutorial. I can't make it exactly like when I make a visual effect graph twice, it never ends up the same way twice in a row, right? So I think this looks really good. Like I said, this is going to be the one that I'm posting in my Patreon that you're going to be able to download if you join my Patreon. But yeah, all the images and stuff will be available in the description of the video. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.